welcome to Guilfordian Reviews. I'm Nick Butinsky.
And I'm Mitchell Hamilton.
Today, we'll be reviewing Scream 4, the latest entry in the Scream franchise, which takes place 11 years after the events of Scream 3. The movie stars Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, David Arquette, Emma Roberts, Hayden Panettiere, and Rory Culkin.
Remember the first three? It's basically the same story. We have a psycho killer donning the ghost face persona and killing various high school teenagers and viewing the same sort of meta-parody satire of horror films, commenting on the rules of horror films, the ideas of sequels, the same, I don't want to say hackneyed, but it's very much in line with the previous three.
Yeah. It seems that after 11 years, Wes Craven hasn't exactly given up on the idea of making a self-aware slasher film hip and edgy, but after a decade without attention, the series itself has, and thusly it's drifted further into parody. Now, for the audience, this means a variety of pros and cons. On the side of cons, it means that they're one step closer towards watching Scary Movie 6. But on the pro side, it seems that the Scream series no longer seems to self-identify in the horror genre.
No, I agree. It's particularly in like certain parts of the film where they kind of name drop various other films.
Yeah.
They're becoming less and less of a horror and almost sort of like a black comedy.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a great way to describe
it. If you remember when we were watching it, people weren't actually scared. They were all laughing. Because the gore is silly, the deaths are silly, the name-dropping, the characters, it's all archetypes, and there's little depth, but it's enjoyable because it's predictable at this point.
Exactly. Which was really both one of the highlights and the detriments of the film, because there were parts that seemed to really want to take themselves seriously. I mean, the postmodern condition which Scream has always founded itself on causes rapid cultural decay in faster mediums like big-budget films. And with that in mind, it seems like Wes Craven took advantage of the unavoidable dated feel in Scream 4. Now, from its first incarnation, the Scream series' foundation has shifted from being rooted in celebrating slasher films to satirizing them, where it once struck a very critical balance between the two. Yeah, I would argue the first one, most definitely.
Agreed.
Now, this time around, it seems that a hint of social criticism took the bite of horror away from the script, causing the humor inherent in the satirical parts to shine, most certainly, but also make the typically cliché slasher elements less ironically funny. And that
kind of boring.
Very much so, but especially because this movie really relies on the corny slasher tropes that it spends the majority of screen time mocking.
Who is this?
Think of me as your director. You're in my movie. Don't blow your role.
What movie?
Same one Marnie's in, only her part got cut way back. You've still got a page or two left. Marnie was the brainy friend, so boring. That character always dies first.
That's not funny.
This isn't a comedy, it's a horror film. People live, people die, and you better start running.
If you hated, Jason X, this is still going to be a lot better than that, and you don't have to worry about it being so over the top that you can't even watch it. It's highly entertaining, in fact, and the ending actually makes a couple very good points about the genre as a whole.
Though it's also sort of an interesting throwback to previous Scream films in a sort of similar end where you have certain characters, spoilers. The motivation, though, kind of bothered me. Honestly, the killer's motivation for why he or she is doing what he or she is doing. I couldn't buy it.
I couldn't buy it in the context of the film, but I liked the idea. I really liked the not the implementation, but the writing that went behind it. I couldn't buy it in the film at all.
It definitely kind of makes reality television, right there at that end. It's not just a bite on horror. It's now MTV and VH1, like all the popular Big Brother sort of shows now are becoming satirized as well.
Exactly.
It's like any bad press is good press, as long as it's any press.
It seems that the satire element of Scream 4 really merges the slasher elements of film, or slasher film specifically, with reality TV, which are comparable to begin with their cliches. Well, what's interesting is that it still relies on such typical slashery cliches. Like, I find it frustrating that in a movie where the most common lines revolve around jokes like, "Oh, you're not supposed to say that in a horror movie,"
Or the joke where the movie nerd right before his ignominious end is, "Wait, I'm gay."
Yeah.
I thought it would help.
I find it frustrating that, with those lines, we're still expected to be scared or feel suspense when a character's about to open a closet door, when for the last 15 years, we've all known the killer isn't back there.
Or, of course, like, the cliche scary music when the door opens and, it's the friend who just, had disappeared for a while. Or the one that really bothered me, the whole webcam issue.
Agreed.
Which has been done in at least Halloween, not the last Rob Zombie, but the one before. It's like, oh, let's do a reality television show where we're watching what they're doing. Almost every big slasher group has done that. Webcamming is not original at all.
It was original in the early 2000s, maybe.
Yeah.
In essence, being self-aware is wonderful when timed correctly. But at this point, it's self-aware about things that people have been paying attention to for far longer than the Scream series has really been active in the 2000s. Since it stopped in 2000 and just got revitalized, it missed so much.
Though I will say one thing, though it is very dated, I do like that they were able to keep the original core cast members.
Agreed.
Particularly David Arquette.
And
Neff
Arquette.
Campbell.
Oh,
yes.
Both of them were wonderful. Overall, I could give Scream 4 3 out of 5 iPhone-using teens. I genuinely found it pretty entertaining once I saw it as a sort of skeletal whodunit rather than a slasher or a horror movie. And the social criticism in the end is very interesting to me, though not really relevant to the film. Now, there are some interesting elements of humor that make it more than a postmodern exposition of slasher films, but there are so many easy and genuinely cheesy moments in the plot that getting pulled out of the film can sometimes backfire. It's certainly not the 1996 classic, but, honestly, who expected it to stand tall under today's post-ironic circumstances?
Agreed. I'm going to give it, I think I'll give it 3 out of 5 name drop moments. And I guess that's the biggest part that I really enjoyed in the film, more so than the previous 2 iterations. It played a lot more on the movie geekery part, and as a movie geek, I kind of like to challenge, each of those moments. Like, oh, I've seen that film too, haha! And I guess I got sort of an ego stroke out of that moment, though I hated to see the movie geek go, but he always does. And I guess it kind of makes sense with the new, I don't want to say hipster sensibility nowadays, but I could see where people would enjoy this film.
With that, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this year on Guilfordian Reviews. And I hope that we'll hear from you next year as we continue to grow and shift.
Have a safe and happy summer, and remember, go and see some movies.